In today's show, we're going to talk about the PowerApps Calendar function, the PowerApps Clock function, and how they can help you build better apps when you're working with date and time, which I know we've done a couple of times, but this one just more topics there. We're also going to cover a little bit about how language comes into play. So if you have to work with multiple regions and how these functions, because they provide default values in the language specific, they really can kind of cut down the challenges for you. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with PowerApps 911, those guys. And today, we're going to talk about the PowerApps Clock function and the PowerApps Calendar function. Mostly because I didn't know they existed until like a week ago. So as I was playing with those, I found out that they were interesting because both of those can output things like the list of months, or the list of days. So you don't have to have that manual list of that. Not the hugest deal. But I also found out that they understand the different languages that PowerApps does. So for example, if I use the calendar function, I just say calendar and then do the different months, then when I spit that out, if I use that in an app and I open up that app in English, I see those months in English. But if I open up the app in French, then I see those months in French. So very interesting stuff. So I'm going to show you how that works. And then I'm going to show you how to save that data back to your data source, because that actually ended up, I spent like 2 hours this morning trying to figure out how all of that works to account for using one save button, whether the app was in English or French. Sound like fun? Now, also, if you're watching this, but Shane, wait, I wanted to learn about like the actual, building a calendar. So we did that in a previous video. So I'll put a link over somewhere on the screen for that. I also have another one that is date time like intro. So if you're thinking, hey, you went too fast, you're not really explaining these simpler concepts like the DateTimeValue function, how it works, no problem. I have a separate video for that. I will also link to somewhere on here. Just think of those as, as Bob Ross would say, happy little accidents that I kind of have the videos that go with what you might be thinking about. But this is the one that if you want to go to the next level with date and times. So whatever, blah, blah, blah. Let's switch over to my desktop and take a look. Okay, so over here on the desktop, real quick, this is basically all we're going to do, right? We're going to work on this, but this is a lot more complex than it looks like at first glance. So don't think I know how to do all that already. You probably don't. But like if we click on add a line here, we can see that the date pickers are showing up, as you expect. The time picker, I forgot that Chewy has some time set. They're great. And not only that, but I can change it and be like, hey, Chewy, you know what? Instead of it being 3:15 p.m., it is 5:14 a.m. Update, right? That pushes back as you'd expect. Let's go to 5:14 p.m. Update there. So that's great, right? We're going to walk through how that works. Nothing too complex. We're not using forms. We're going to use patch and we're individual controls. So I'll talk about the defaults. There's some nuances there we're going to learn. But what's super interesting now is if I switch over to this browser right here, I believe. Nope, this one. So this browser is in French. Look, browser language FR. So I set this browser to be in French, and notice that this same exact app, now the months are all in French. And I don't speak French, so I'm not even going to try to say any of those words. More importantly, though, I didn't type in all that. So we're using the calendar function to spit out the months like that, so we don't have to do anything manual there. So I thought that would be kind of fun to talk through, explain how that works. Also, it turns out that patching it from French, right? Because you notice here in French, remember in English I had AMPM. Over here, the French predominantly don't use AMPM clocks, so I'm told. I never asked a French person. Right, they do things mostly in 24-hour time. And so since things are done in 24-hour time, and I now want to go down here and say, oh, well, I really want to change this time to be, actually, first thing I want to do is hit the refresh so we get the updated. So there you go. So that was the 5:14 p.m. that we set, right? 17:14. So if we change this and say I want this to be 10:14 or 10:10, right? So this would be an AM time in English, right? So we're going to say update Chewy's birthday. So now it says 10:10 up here as you'd expect. And if we switch back to the English version and refresh, 10:10 a.m. Same type of deal though. If we go over here and like, hey, I want to make that actually 10 p.m. That's 22. So 22:12. Notice AMPM not here. Update birthday. So that looks good there. And if we go over back to this browser and refresh, it is 10:12 p.m. Okay. That's a lot trickier than it looks. So how does it all work? Let's go start over here, and let's start with what set me down this road to begin with, and that is the calendar function. So I did not know this. This is my quest to update or have a video for every PowerApps function there is. The calendar function, if you go up here and you do calendar and then you do dot, so then you can do the month long, right? So that is the word January spelled all the way out. Month short, Jan. It also has the weekdays long and short, so Saturday and Sat. So all of these are built in. If you remember the first video I did on this, I think I ended up typing in all the days because I didn't have a quick way to get them. So saves you a lot of work. But once again, what's really cool about this, so it's just calendar months long. When I do that, it spits out a single column table with all the months, but it's language dependent. So I build it in this app, great, I'm in English, but when we open it over here in French, right? So here's the same exact function in the French, let's change it to items. So this editing window is also canvas, I don't know, whatever that is. So this one is also in French, but you can see same type of list. So same function, different outputs based on the browser language. Very fun. Okay, back over here to English where I'm more comfortable, obviously. So that was how we did this. Now, setting the default, this was something else I did wrong the first time, quite frankly. But so here, I was like, all right, I need to get from these gallery one selected birthday, right? So Chewy's birthday is over here is 4/4/2021. And so when that comes in, I had to use the text function. And so with the text function, if you do 4 M's like that, that will output the long month format. So it converts the 4 to the word April because I had to match, right? In my dropdown, April is not 4. April is just the word April. And so I couldn't connect those dots. So, but using the text function would go from the number 4 representing April to the actual text word April. So that's how I was able to set the default value here. That was a little, a little different. If we look here on the items, I just did 1 to 31. I know some months have 28, some have 30. February have 29 every 4 years, right? There's a lot of confusion there. I just made it 1 to 31. If you really want to, you could have a bunch of ifs there to control like showing exact number. I didn't care that much. If you do, you could definitely do that. The default for this one is pretty straightforward. So this one though, I forgot about it earlier, but there is a function called day. So if you use the day function and give it a date, then it will return the day digit, right? So in this case, 4, because Chewy's birthday was 4/4. If we go here, we choose Apollo, just so it's different. Same thing, right? So Apollo's month or day is the 17th, and so the day function returns 17. Now you're thinking, Shane, why don't you use that on the previous one? Because the day function, there is a month function, there is a year function, but they all return the number value. The number 4 didn't match August, so I had to get to the text word. But here, I could just say day and then 17 because 17 matches 17. Not too bad. Here on the year part, for the years, I just did a sequence, started in 1900 and just did a 200-year sequence. So my dropdown literally has every number from 1900 to 20, whatever the 200 years after that is. It's sad I can't think of that. 2099. So that's how I got the dates or the years here. You could set your range by just controlling sequence. And then the default for this one is I use that year function. So that was pretty straightforward. In the first round of writing all these, I forgot about the day, the year, the month function. And so I actually wrote them the long way, but this works much better. Okay, so that's how you do those 3. Before we talk about patching, let's talk about how we do these 3. So then this one here, this is my dropdown for, and I guess I didn't show you this, but with my dropdown, when I am in English, I start at 12 and go to 11, right? As you probably would expect. And with doing this, I get my times. Great. But if I go back to my French one, I went over here, and I started at 1 and went to 24, which I now realize I actually should have went to 0. I just literally realized I made a mistake. So we're going to fix that in a second. But you get the idea. I have different drop-down values here. So the way that we did that is we said, hey, got an X out here. So I had a if, and so there's also this function called clock I'd never used. And so when you do clock has a property called isClock24. And so what the clock function does is it returns true if the default for that language is a 24-hour time based, right? So which like France is. English, we don't. We do not do that. So you can see that my current clock here, clock is 24, is false. But if we go over here to my French built browser, and we just throw a label on the screen. Look at me using French-based stuff. And then we do clock. We can see the value. So all clock has is AMPM, AMPM short, which would be an A or a P, or is 24. And so then this one's going to say true because the French language defaults to a 24-hour time. So now that we understand that, you can see that I said, hey, if their time is 24-hour time, then just use the sequence function. Remember we said this is wrong, so this should actually be 24, 0. So start at 0 and then go through 23, right? Those are the 24 hours of the day. Duh, Shane. And if not, I didn't have an easy way to do this and put them in 12 to this order. There might be a better way to write that, but I just used the table function real quick to spit out 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11. So then that way the drop down would look like, you know, someone in the English language or one of the 12-hour based languages would expect. Not too bad. And then over here on the default though, I had to do, so the green up there you can ignore. That was like one of my first tries. I saved it because it was working, but I didn't like it. So I simplified. I said, hey, if the clock is 24 o'clock, then just use the hour function to get the hour, right? The same way we use the day and the day and the year function above, there's an hour function. So it just pulls the hour out of the birthday. And in a 24-hour base time, it'll get a 15 for 3 p.m., right? It just does its thing. If it wasn't, I'm not going to walk all through this formula, but basically what I figured out I had to do to extract the hours, I had to use the text function and then use the hour function and, I had to use the text function, use the H format, because remember I want a 3, I don't want 03, so I use the single hour format. But the H could also have problems if there's AM and PM involved. So I had to strip it down or tell it that, do the single H with AMPM. So that way, instead of 3 p.m. returning as 15, it would turn as 3 with a PM hanging. It'd be return as 3 p.m. Right? If I just put an H here in English, here I can let's just show you real quick. Insert a label. So if I just take now, right? So let's see what time it is. It is currently 11:51 a.m. on my Sunday. I'm supposed to go somewhere soon. I should hurry up and finish this video. Anyway, if we do the text function here, if you do just a simple H like you want, then it returns an 11. It's not going to help though. So let's do now plus 5 hour plus, let's see. So now date add now, and we'll add 5 hours. So that would be 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So notice that when I use the H just like this, it returns that as 16. It returns in a 24-hour format. So to get the H to come back as not 16, you have to include AM and PM. Now it returns 4 p.m., or if we get rid of the now, it would show 11 a.m. Okay? Why that's important is because now if we go back up here and we look at this, I had to account for that in this madness. So I had to use it return in this format, but 4 p.m. doesn't match the 4 that was stored here. So then I had to use the left function to strip off the PM portion so it would return just the number 4 so that it would match. And that's why if we click on, let's just set Chewy's, here, let's click on Chewy real quick. So like if we set Chewy to 4 p.m. and update his birthday, this will absolutely work because it's now default, or it can default, right? Because that default work is shenanigans. Whatever, copy the formula if you don't understand, I get it. Or go watch the other video where I kind of go through that stuff much slower. On the minute side, this was a sequence and I wanted the time. You notice that my time as time should, it shows up, minutes are 04, they're not just 4. So I use the sequence column to get a list of numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12. And then I added a column to it called formatted and just pipe that through the text column. And that's what adds that leading 0 to it. So once again, covered in the other video, but that's how I got the drop downs to be 04, which is what people expect to see when they're entering time. For the default here, I think I didn't have to do too much. I was just able to use the minute function straight up. Worked like a charm. And then the AMPM. So the items, I used the clock function AMPM. So then that way, if I was in a different language where AM and PM was represented something else, right? But they still wanted to show it, then I would show it in their particular language. I don't have a good example of a language like that, but I bet you do. But then the default here, let's go back up here. The default, I had to use the text function. So there is not a AMPM function like there was the day, the hour, the minute. So that worked. One other thing that went into this though, remember when we were over in, when we were over in French, here we go, you don't see the drop down. And so what I did, right, because they don't use it in a 24-hour clock. So what I did is I set the visible property. I said, not is clock 24. So if it's a 24-hour clock, that's true. Not, which is what the exclamation point in front means, do the opposite of that. So that's false. So that's why in English this shows up, because our clock is not 24. But in French, where the clock is 24, it does. Mind melting a little? Yeah, I'm almost like confusing saying this. But the good news is you can watch this video as many times as you need to get all this to click. It all eventually works. Okay, so there you go. So that's how these 6 drop downs come together. So now, how are we updating? This is, like I told you, this is the part that I probably spent over an hour on, maybe 2 hours. I spent a lot of time this morning. That's why it's almost noon. Oops. So here it is. So luckily, we're just gonna get rid of all. Let's just get rid of all the screen because I ended up not needing any of this, thankfully. Okay, so patch doggy data. That's the name of our SharePoint list. Gallery 1 selected, so the selected record. And so then set the birthday column. I used the DateTimeValue function. Remember the DateTimeValue function, covered extensively in the other video. What it does is you give it a string of a date and time, and it spits out a date time object, right? Because SharePoint is expecting a date time object to be passed to it, or your data source would be the same if it was SharePoint or Dataverse or SQL, doesn't matter. It's expecting a date time object, so I can't send it all the strings that I just created. So I take all the strings and I said, give me the selected day, a space, the selected month, a space, the selected year, a space, the selected hour, a semicolon, a selected value for the minutes. And then if the clock is 24, don't include anything else, right? Because in a 24-hour clock, I don't need to send AMPM. If it's not 24, then send a space and then AMPM selected value. So that way, when I send English, it'll send 3 p.m. And then I did a comma, and this was new to me also. I did not realize that DateTimeValue will accept a language thing. It assumes the language, but I was getting better results by just using the language function, which returns, in my case, EN-US, or over in the French browser, it returned FR, by passing the language. But this, after lots of trial and error, this formula right here works perfectly whether we're in an English browser or in a French browser. And that was the big win for me. That was what I spent all my maddening time back and forth. That's where I realized I had to have a special if in here because I needed both AM and PM on for English but not for French, etc., etc. So that is what your patch statement needs to look like. Steal that formula, copy that formula. Remember, if you subscribe to training.powerapps911.com in the curated library, you can just download the app and copy and paste this whole app. But doesn't matter. Either way, that was the formula. This was the pattern that I needed to get all this to work. Whoa. Okay, one more thing, and then I'll let you guys go. So the last little piece of this, was as I was troubleshooting, I kind of threw labels down here, right? So like this was a label, let me see what the date time value was spitting out. If this returned blank, then I knew the patch would get blank. So this was a way I could visually see what patch was trying to send over. This I just threw on now. And the reason here was mostly for the French browser, right? So over here, I can see that, look, there's what now looks like. So it is, you know, August 8th. I don't know how you even say, I'm not going to try. I won't embarrass myself. But then this was that same one in April, right, which is the time up here. But you notice here in the French browser, I also wanted to be able to see it completely in English. So I was like, how would I do that? I don't know why I wanted to see it in English. I just wanted to see what I was doing in English. So I had a little fun here. I wanted you guys to see this because this one was a little bit of an interesting as well. So first off, I used the datetime function right here, like we've been talking about. So that's that date time value. It's taking those French words or English words, whatever, and making the date time value object based on my drop downs up above, right? What I initially wanted to do was then just say, hey, take that and then do comma and hard code it to English, so it would always just flip those over to English. That doesn't work, okay? So if you do the date time value function and you pass it, you know, the Spanish word for April, then you can't say output this in English because the date time value function is like, you know, the Spanish word for April is not April. I don't understand what you mean, right? So it got confused. So that what I did was I used a date time value object and just using the default language so it would assemble it as French. And then once I had it as French, I said, hey, text function, here's a date time, right? Because that's the output of the date time value. Text function, take that date time value, which it doesn't care about time zone at that point. It's just like, hey, oh, it's a date time object. It is, because date time object is a date time object. It is not language dependent. It is what it is. And then I said, text function, take that, use the long date time format. So that's where you spit out with the day, month, year, all that garbage. But then, right, because text would also have assumed the browser's language. So in the French browser, it would have assumed French. But so here what I was able to do is say, hey, just assume English. So then that forced it into English. And so that's why I see the same here and I see the same here, even though this browser is French, because I forced the language to English. But you can't force the date time value, but you can force the text function. Kind of fun, right? Whew. Okay. I know that's a whole lot. Remember, we've got those other videos that go through more of the simpler side of this stuff. If you're like mind, brain melted, like how was even the date time value function do? How does now work? Separate video for all that. This video got you though through working with the multi-language stuff. If you have any questions, any comments, any ideas of how I could do better with this, leave them below. Oh, that reminds me, there's also a video out there for time zones. If you're having a hard time with time zones, right? Shane, that's the next thing I got to account for. I already did that video. It was linked somewhere else on the way also. Yeah, I don't know. Speaking of time, I'm out of time. I have to take my lovely wife to lunch. So with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Before you go, be sure to click on the subscribe button over here so that way you'll be notified when new videos come out. If you need any help or you want to work together, whether your problem's big or small, check us out at PowerApps 911. We do it all. I rhymed. Or if you're looking for more formal training offerings, we have those linked up here somewhere. So check them out. Thanks and have a great day.